you got to be merciless to your giant. So if you have this issue and it is destroying you, it is destroying everything around you, man, I would be merciless to get it out of my life. I've tried to look at this passage kind of from a different angle, and this is maybe more the traditional way that we look at this particular passage, and that's what I want to talk to you about today, is how to kill a giant. A giant is anything in your life that kind of dominates you or dominates your thinking, or you look at this situation and you say, man, I could not overcome this, or I cannot get the victory over this. And really what this passage lines up for us at the end of this passage is how to kill a giant. So all of us deal with giants. All of us deal with issues. Maybe your giant deals somewhat with relational. Maybe your giant is tied to money. Maybe it's tied to your health. I don't know what your giant is. I don't know what it is in your life that looks unconquerable, or there's no way that I can get the victory over this. Maybe you have an addiction, something that you're struggling with that you can't seem to get the victory over. This sermon is for all of us that are dealing with these particular issues. So how did David finally kill this giant? The first thing I want you to notice is, and the first thing that he did that got him the victory over this giant, was you must see your giant with spiritual eyes. That's number one. So if you want to follow in your notes, see your giant with spiritual eyes. And we're going to begin reading today in verse number 45, when David says this. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. So the first thing I want you to notice, that David's perspective on Goliath was a spiritual perspective. So what he's really talking about here is this speaks to motive. Why did he want to kill the giant? He wanted to kill the giant because this giant was speaking against his God. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians 10:31 that I'm sure we've all heard or familiar with, but it's an important one. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. That's an important line right there. Whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. So there's two ways that I can kind of go through my life. I can go through my life with thinking only of the physical. So how this affects me physically, and what satisfies me physically, and what's good for me physically. Or I can think in the spiritual. And as Christians, I believe that we're called to think of life in the spiritual. So I get up every morning, and God gave me breath in my lungs. He gave me another day to live, and the purpose of my existence is to bring glory to God. The purpose for my existence is not for my gratification. The purpose for my existence is to bring glory to God. So that's why I'm still alive. That's why I'm here, because God has a purpose for me. He wants my life to bring glory to Him. So I want to wake up and think about that and kind of let that dominate my decisions as I go through the day. The problem with all of us, and myself included, all of us, is we tend to think only of ourselves. So we go to our jobs and we do what we have been hired to do, and what oftentimes dominates our thinking is, okay, like, I want to work hard today because I want to have this perception of a hard worker. I'm concerned about my reputation amongst the people that I work with. So it kind of, I don't know if you guys are like me, but you tend to think about yourself a lot and think about how people perceive you and see you. And so my problem is sometimes is that I'm looking at how people perceive me through the physical eyes. When really I should go to work and say, okay, how can I bring God glory through my job? So what would God want me to do at my job? Well, whatever your hand finds to do it with what? All your might. So I want to work hard, because working hard not gives me a good reputation amongst my coworkers, but brings glory to God. That should be my motivation. The problem is we go through and we think only of the physical. Our focus is the material, not the spiritual. So when I have a giant in my life, so maybe that giant is debt. Like I'm swimming in debt. I'm underneath it in debt. why do you want to get out of debt? Why do you want to destroy this giant of debt? Do you want to do it just so you can spend more money on other stuff? That's a bad reason to get out of debt. Okay, I want to not be under this. I don't want to be enslaved to somebody so that I am freer to do more for Christ. I want to get out of debt so that I have more disposable income so that I can bring glory to God with that income. If my motivation is solely for the physical, I'm going to struggle with that. Okay, let's say, why do you want to lose weight? You have this, I've constantly wrestled with my weight and I want to lose weight. What's the motivation? Is it so that I walk into the office and people go, man, you're looking good? Is it solely for how people will perceive me? You see what I'm saying this morning? So the motivation is it merely physical? Do I want to go to the gym and people go, man, look at the size of arms on that guy? Okay, now I don't think there's anything wrong with losing weight and going to the gym and working. I'm not against any of that. But what's the motivation behind it? Do I want to lose weight and take care of my body because then it gives me more strength to do something for God? That's a pretty good reason. That's seeing my life through spiritual eyes, not physical. You don't fight physical with physical and win. You fight physical with spiritual. That's the way you win, because you get God involved in the process. And so what David saw is, David saw this situation through not physical eyes. Everybody else was looking at the situation through physical eyes. They were looking at it through the sense of, man, this guy's huge, we can't beat this guy. And David was looking at the situation through spiritual eyes. So if you're going to defeat your giant, as David defeated Goliath, you must see your giant with spiritual eyes. Number two, the second thing the text teaches us is you must believe God is greater than your giant. You must believe that God is greater than your giant. Notice what he says in 46 and 47. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Who's he constantly referring to? God's going to defeat you. God's going to defeat you. So what does that teach us about David? David had great faith in God. He believed that God was greater than this giant. Our actions are dictated by our beliefs. We do what we believe. I know people who will not get on an airplane. They will not do it. And they will not do it, I guess, there's no judgment because there's things that I won't do, but they don't believe in the pilot or the airline or the people that put the plane together. They lack the belief that they can get them from point A to point B safely. Although you have a better odds of getting from A to B safely on a plane than in a car. But I don't think anybody rode their mule here today, right? We all got in our car and we drove here, and we believed that the person that built the car put it together well. It'll get us from A to B. So we believe in that. And this is, but people won't get on planes because at their core, it's what they don't believe that planes are safe, right? That's their belief. So their belief dictates their actions. What I do, my beliefs are revealed in how I act. Faith without works is dead being alone. You can say all day, I believe, but the reality is our beliefs are lined up with our actions. So you have a whole bunch of people who are sitting on top of a hill looking down at Goliath. They believe that God is greater than that giant, but that has not moved them to action. It moved David to action. This is why a lot of times we don't get victory over our giants in our lives because we don't really believe that God can give us the victory. I really don't believe that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. That, in other words, that there's no amount of financial resources that are available to him. I don't really believe that. And since I don't really believe that, I don't think he can help me get out of this debt. So what really it comes to is an issue of faith. And the problem is we have been constantly pumped in our culture, believe in yourself, believe in yourself, believe in yourself. Now, the problem with that is that every person in this room, you have limitations. I can believe in myself all I want. I could no more run a marathon today than the man on the moon. The belief would only take me so far because my body has limitations. I've not trained it. I've not prepared it to go that distance. So I can believe in something, but there is a limit to what I can do. So the point is that we're constantly told to believe in ourselves, believe in ourselves. And what happens with us? We're often disappointed in ourselves because our belief is not based on that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, but rather I'm taught to believe in myself and I kind of let myself down and I'm disappointed in myself. And so this is the difference between us and David. David's focus was, I can't beat this giant by myself, but I believe that God can beat this giant. And so he moved forward based on that belief. He genuinely believed that God could deliver this giant into his hand. So he moved forward based on that belief. Believe in God and trust in him. He is bigger than any issue you have. So you're looking at somebody and they've acted the same way their entire life. And you're like, they'll never change, they'll never be different. Okay, and so we just give up on people. What does that really say? I don't believe that God can do a work in somebody's heart. Karen and I watched a movie last night called The Case for Christ. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie. I would recommend it. It's Lee Strobel was an atheist who was he was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune, and his wife was converted. And he basically wanted to break down he thought, man, if I can prove that the resurrection wasn't legit, then I could break down Christianity. So he went at it like an investigative reporter to break down Christianity, to break it down and say that the resurrection is not true. So he spent a lot of time, and what happened is in the process is he found that the resurrection was true, and Jesus was real, and he did raise from the dead. And so once you kind of come to this issue of the resurrection, there's one of two things you got to do with it. You got to just, I don't believe it anyway, or he was the Son of God. The resurrection proved that Jesus Christ was who he claimed to be and had the power that he claimed to have. So, but his wife really was the one that was converted first, and man, he was so stubborn and so hard-hearted about this. He didn't want to believe it was true. And his wife began to pray a verse. And the verse is basically that God can take a heart of stone and soften that heart. And she prayed that over her husband over and over and over again, and finally God broke his heart. She believed that God was able to soften her husband's hard heart. So the reason why we have these giants who continue to have victory over us is we don't really believe that God can conquer them. We're trying to do it ourselves, and we're coming up empty. And we're not getting God involved in the process. We're not turning the situation over to God. We're just trying to deal with it ourselves. So we're trying to change somebody's hard heart, and we're getting frustrated, and we're getting angry with them. And instead of committing the situation to God. And this is why he conquered the giant, because he believed that God was greater than the giant, and if God got involved in this giant killing process, that God would win. Number 3, how did he kill it? How do you kill a giant? How did David kill a giant? Number 3, run toward your giant. I love the phrase there. So it was that when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. I love that. He didn't, if I'm going to go into this conflict, I'm kind of like, okay, I guess it's on now. To run to something means you're eager to get it going. Let's get it on. This speaks to procrastination. We have giants. We don't deal with them. How many of us in this room have started the diet on Monday? Right? I'll deal with it tomorrow. The issue here is that David ran towards his giant. He dealt with it today. The longer we wait to do something, the harder it is to do it. So if God speaks to you to do something, do it today. If you feel that call, do it today. Years ago, we went to Colorado and we went on Scott and Tammy went on a raft. There's two things I don't like: water and heights. So we went on a raft ride, and we're riding this raft, and we're with a group of people, and we stop, and there's how high was it, Scott? Was it 25? Make it really, really high, man. Was it like 30 feet high? So they're like, hey, who wants to jump off this 30-foot cliff? And Scott's like, I'm in. You in, Mark? And I'm like, yeah. I'm in. So they had the little bunny one where the kids jumped off. It was like 5 foot. And we just kept walking and walking. And I'm getting higher and higher. And I'm like, what am I doing? But then now I'm too committed. You know what I'm saying? I'm too far up the hill to back out now. And the guy's saying, now look, man, when you jump off this cliff here, make sure you keep your legs together. And make sure that you stay vertical. Because if you get sideways, man, it's going to hurt real bad. And I was like, what am I doing? But it was like it happened so fast that I committed to it. And it's like, who wants to go first? So I'm like, I'm going. Because I just wanted to get it over with. And I'll never forget going off that cliff and thinking, am I ever going to hit the bottom? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Am I ever going to hit the water? And finally hit the water and then went clear down there and come back up. And I'm like, yeah! Now, I tell you right now, if I'd have known that had been a part of the journey, if I'd have had time to research it, if I'd have gone to YouTube and watched all these videos of people that had disasters as they jumped off the cliff, and this guy broke his neck when he jumped off the cliff, I'm telling you what, I'd have never got out of the raft. Because I'd have had all this time to think about it. And that's kind of how sometimes we are with life, right? God speaks to us. God tells us, you need to conquer this giant. And we wait and we procrastinate and we think about it too much. And I love what David did here. David had this great faith in God and he just ran towards his giant because he believed that God was with him. Run towards your giant. Number 4, how do you kill a giant? 4, prepare to be persistent in your fight with the giant. Prepare to be persistent with your fight, in your fight with the giant. So David, when he went to fight Goliath, how many stones did he take? It's on the thing up there. He took 5, right? Then he took his staff in his hand and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. Now there's a whole lot of debate about what the 5 means. And it's kind of ridiculous. Like people are like, he had 4 other brothers. So he's got 1 for each one of the brothers. That was a belief. You know what I think the whole thing is? I think that David is like, I'm going to keep flinging till he's dead. He understood that he was human, and he understood that, I may get to doing this, and I may shoot this stone out, and it may miss him, or it may bounce off his armor, but I'm going to pull out another one. I'm going to fight to the death. I'm not going to let this giant. I'm either going to beat him, or I'm going to die trying. Can I just tell you something? In your giant, you got to just keep going or die trying. Be persistent. I love 2 Corinthians 4. It's a great chapter in the Bible. And if I can let me read the first couple of verses. I was reflecting on it this morning in 2 Corinthians 4. It starts the chapter with this. Paul's kind of talking about his life and what he's gone through. He says, therefore, since we have this ministry as we have received mercy, we do not lose heart. Being in the ministry and doing what God has called you to do can get discouraging. It can get hard. But we have renounced the hidden things of shame, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of God deceitfully, but by manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God. And then he goes on to say this in verse number 6. He says, For it is the God who commanded light to shine out of darkness, who has shown in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. And then he says this in verse 8. We are hard pressed on every side, yet not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. The point being that he's like, look, we get knocked down from time to time in our fight, but the fact that we're knocked down doesn't mean that we should give up. These are literally athletic terms. And he's describing that there are times in our walk where we're going to have slip-ups, we're going to fall, but let's not stay on the mat. Like I used to love boxing. Not much of an MMA guy, but I did like the boxing a lot. And one of the things that's, so when I was a kid, man, one of the most popular movies was Rocky. Rocky, how many times did Rocky get knocked down? Which I saw one time they did a thing and said it would not be possible for a human being to even have a brain if he got knocked down and got back up and take the shots that he took, But that's Hollywood, but there is something inspiring about somebody who, when they do get knocked down, they get right back up and they get back in the fight. And that's how we ought to be fighting our giants. Sometimes you're going to lose. Sometimes you're going to have bad days. Anybody in the room have bad days? Man, I gotta kick this weight thing. I've got to kick this exercise thing. And then you have one day where you eat everything you can get your hands on, right? So what do we do? The issue is not to not let one day turn into two. The issue is get back up and fight again tomorrow. Be persistent. Don't let the devil get you down. You do have the victory through Jesus Christ. So be persistent. Number 5, be merciless to your giant. How do we kill a giant? Be merciless. Now this is where it gets kind of gory, okay? As if a stone in the middle of your forehead isn't gory enough. Let's read what happens back in 1 Samuel 17. So it says, verse 49, Then David put his hand in the bag, and he took out a stone, and he slung it, and he struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. So remember, David turned down Saul's armor, and he turned down his weapons. So what happens? Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him, and cut off his head with it. Like, whoa. So what does he do? He runs up, he takes out Goliath's sword, and with Goliath's sword, he cuts off his head. And he said, this is like extreme, man. But it gets kind of better. It says, and when the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell among the road, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel returned from their chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. So I just get, here's David holding this guy's head. He cuts off his head, and then he takes his head back to Jerusalem. Man, that's a little excessive. Why did he do that? Well, I think that there's a couple reasons why he did it. One is he did it because he wanted to make sure he's dead. If your head is severed from your body, you are officially gone. So he wants to make sure that the giant is not just dazed or knocked unconscious. He wants to finish him off. And it's ruthless. It's brutal. Okay, what does that have to do with us? Can I just tell you, with your giant, you got to be merciless to your giant. Jesus said something in Matthew 5 that a lot of people have misunderstood and even taken this literally to the point that they've done it. So this is not what Jesus is advocating here in Matthew 5:29. He says this, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. So a lot of people, I've heard of people that have done this. I've not known them personally, but just you see people that do stuff like this. So he says, for it is far more profitable for you that one of your members perish than your whole body be cast into hell. Verse 30 of Matthew 5. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you, for it's more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. What Jesus is saying here, when you're fighting a giant in your life, you need to take drastic measures to get it out of your life. John Owens, who was a Puritan years ago, is most famous for this quote, be killing sin or it will be killing you. That's an important line to remember. Be killing sin or it will be killing you. So let me make it practical. If I have a giant in my life, if I'm a male or a female and I have a porn problem in my life and it is destroying relationships and it's destroying everything around me, it's destroying my marriage and my relationship with the opposite sex, and if I have this problem, okay, if I have a porn problem, and this is the giant in my life, I would remove every instrument that would give me access to porn in my home. You say, you mean like go back to flip phone stages? Yes. Somebody said to me once, I've never forgotten this. They said, if you take your cell phone, if you take your smartphone and you give it to your kid and there's no limit to where they can go or what they can look at. It's like putting a stack of porn magazines in the corner of their bedroom and saying, hey, don't look at that. You got to be merciless to your giant. So if you have this issue and it is destroying you, it is destroying everything around you, man, I would be merciless to get it out of my life. I would get rid of my computers, I would get rid of my smartphones, I would get rid of anything that I could easily access this problem. That's chopping the head off. If I have a spending problem where I can't turn down a deal, and I have credit card debt that's unmanageable, and I'm constantly going over, and I'm not living on then I would shred every credit card I have. Be merciless to it. That's what David did here with this giant. He cut his head off. This guy ain't coming back. Be killing sin, or it will be killing you. Now I have number 6, which is not in your notes. And I've thought about this all week, and I've decided that this is why this is in the Bible. This is my belief, okay? So, it's a weird kind of passage, beginning in verse 55. When Saul saw David going out against the Philistines, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? Now what? Okay, now either Saul's got short-term memory, because what's David been up to this point? His harp bearer, right? He's been his full-time harp. Surely he would know the name of his harp player. So he lives in the palace. He has somewhat of a relationship with him. But he says, he doesn't ask who he is. He asks, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as your soul lives, O king, I do not know. So the king said, inquire whose son this young man is. Then as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? So David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. I think that this is here because what the text is implying is David was the son of Jesse. And everybody in this room is the son of somebody. And so we all stand on somebody else's shoulders. So stay humble after the win. Stay humble after the victory. You won because God worked. He's walking up holding the giant's head. Look at who I killed. Now, who did he ask for to help him before? He asked for God to help him, right? Before he fought the giant, who did he ask to help him? It was God, right? So if he got God involved, who was it that gave him the victory? God. So after the victory, who deserves the credit? God. We're all somebody else's kid. We all stand on the shoulders of great men and great women who have come before us. Don't get arrogant and take credit for what only God deserves. And don't forget that you wouldn't be here and you couldn't do what you do if somebody had not sacrificed for you. You say, I had a terrible parent, okay? That you may have. But you're alive and you're here. They didn't kill you in the womb. They took care of you. Most babies don't come out of the womb like, I'm self-sufficient. They wait till they're teenagers to believe that, right? We all came out of the womb completely dependent on somebody else, did we not? So somebody had to get us to the point, whether it was a parent, a step-parent, a foster parent, somebody had to take care of us to get us to the point where we are today. Never forget that. And never forget that whatever you have the victory in, it is because Christ has worked through you. Not because you're really all that great. So stay humble after the victory. David had a whole lot more victories after this, but I believe it started with, I would say it didn't even start with this one. It started with the lion and the bear, right? So he's facing this giant of a lion and giant of a bear, and God delivered them, and he gave God the glory, and he now gets the victory over this Goliath, and he gives God the glory, and he doesn't become arrogant, he doesn't become proud, because that's the biggest issue that we'll all face. We all get the victory over something, and we want to pat ourselves on the back. To God be the glory, great things he has done. So what's your giant in your life? Well, see your giant with spiritual eyes. Stop looking at everything through the physical. Think of it in the spiritual. Believe, what is your giant? Is it a person? Is it finances? Is it health? Is it, what is it? Believe that God is greater than your giant. man, I'm in this financial situation, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of it. If God really does own everything, he can help you out. Does that mean we just sit back and never try and just God will work it out? No. That's not necessarily how it works. Because you do the next thing, right? You run towards your giant. Don't put it off. Don't procrastinate. And then prepare to be persistent. There's going to be up and down days. Don't give up. Don't go, I tried once and it didn't work. Be persistent. And then if you get the victory over your giant, be merciless to it. Don't allow the devil a foothold. The Bible talks about that, where we allow the devil a foothold in our life and he'll walk through the door, man. And then when you get the victory, stay humble. Remember where you came from. Remember who your dad is. Because your dad's the one that took care of you. Your dad's the one that gave you the victory.
Thank you again for listening to our series on 1 Samuel with Pastor Mark Doss. If you have questions about today's message, please contact our church office at info@topekabaptist.org. Give us a call at 785-862-0988 or check us out online at www.topekabaptist.org.